It was early summer of 2006 and I started having panic attacks, so I went to the doctor and talked to him about it. I had been on every drug for anxiety except benzodiazepines, including, for the sake of time I'll cut the list short, Wellbutrin, Paxil, Buspar, etc. So I told him this and we agreed to try benzos. He gave me the 4 choices, which I thought was a little odd, and I chose Xanax right away. A lot of friends back home had used them recreationally for some time. We decided that since I drive for a living, that I should start taking the extended release version so I wasn't popping bars all day. He started me off with 1 milligram of Xanax extended release once a day in the morning. This worked phenomenally for about a month. Then I started having to take 2. So I went back and got a prescription for 2 milligrams Xanax XR. Same thing, worked great, and taking 2 had extreme recreational value. I should have stopped here, but I truly believe to this day that I started a habit that just wouldn't quit. And a month later, I had my first bottle of 3 milligrams of Xanax XR. This particular form of Xanax is nothing to mess around with. 3 milligrams of Alprazolam will lay almost anyone out. I will say this also, the extended release is no lie. I truly feel like I'm on 3 milligrams of Xanax for 12 hours straight. No exaggeration whatsoever. This is where my life started going downhill. My girlfriend and I started taking 2 of these bad boys on the weekends to party, and this is where my memory problems start. It got to the point where I was still thinking somewhat rationally and wanted to experience a true Alprazolam high. So with my experiences from Oxycontin, I decided to start blowing and chewing pills. This is where my brain began to become a slave. I would eat 1.5 and snort the last half. I got into several pretty violent fights with my girlfriend as a result of passing out and being woken up for some reason or another. This drug made me go into insanely violent fits of rage and psychosis. I cut myself up pretty bad a few times, never remember doing any of it. Now to the night in question. It actually started out alright. I had a good day at work, made $100 in tips, and bought 1/8 of some really high quality nugs and was set to party my face off. I bought an 18-pack of beer on the way home, picked my girl up, and headed to my apartment. As it turned out, none of my friends showed up. 7 p.m. We both take 2 6 milligram Xanax XR, and I start drinking heavily. At this point, I roll a large joint, and we get toasted. I'm very stoned at this point, and put on some Aqua Teen Hunger Force that I had borrowed from a friend on DVD. 7:45 p.m. I've gotten 4 beers into me, and I'm feeling extremely inebriated. My words are slurred so much that it's almost ineligible, and I'm giggling like a schoolgirl. I decide to blow an entire pill, which I've never done before. I crush it up, and as soon as it goes into my nose, I black out. I woke up 2 hours away in my parents' bed without a clue how I got there. I had no clue what happened, and my arms were stitched up and bandaged. Eventually, I got parts of the story, and it went something like this. After I blew that pill, I kind of fell over and went to sleep for about 30 minutes, at which point I took 2 more pills. For the life of me, I had no idea what the hell would possess me to take 2 more, up to 15 now, but that's what I did. I somehow managed to get up and was apparently acting pretty normal as far as being on Xanax is concerned. I drank something like 6 more beers and popped another 3, 24 milligrams, and I go unconscious. My girl proceeds to slap me to get me awake, and when I wake up, I lose all control of my sanity. I went into the kitchen and got the sharp butcher knife, and from what she tells me, I started chasing her around the house, shouting, "I'll fucking kill you!" over and over again. She started crying, so I started carving up my arms, taking the blood onto my finger and writing "kill me" on the bathroom wall. I decide I'm not high enough yet, and take 2 more. At this point, I'm rolling around babbling incoherently, talking to people who aren't there, getting into arguments with myself, yelling at people. I told my girl's mom that I was Jesus and would kill her whole family if she called my parents or something like that. My parents came and got me, and I woke up at their house. The whole car ride I was babbling gibberish. They didn't take me to the hospital, thank God, and I came out of the fog about 4 days later feeling extremely stupid. Once I pop more than I'm supposed to, I can't stop. It's like I'm a robot and the pills are my fuel. I'm telling you, I've never been so confused in my entire life, and I know I hurt a lot of people that night. I feel really stupid for it, and it will never happen again. I cut off the Xanax and jumped over to clonazepam, which doesn't make me angry at all, even when I slip up and take an extra one or two. It doesn't make me lose any memory, and it does essentially the same thing. I've been using drugs since I was 16 years old. I've tried just about every drug and possible way of getting high under the sun. It was a fun ride up until I turned about 19. I started getting in trouble with the law for being drunk mainly. I tried heroin for the first time just last year. I went all out and shot up for my first time, and I was on my drug of choice, Xanax. I must say, it was the most vibrant, orgasmic experience of my life. After that, I led on my normal path, just drinking and popping about 17 Xanax bars in one pop. I'm a very tiny girl, but I've always been okay. Probably looking incredibly stupid and fucked up, but always okay. Just about a month ago, I was on Xanax, which makes me careless. I was around a dope head and agreed to shoot up, which sober I wouldn't have. As I shot up, I had a fentanyl patch on, which I've never done. That's the last thing I remember until I woke up at the hospital with my family around me crying their eyes out. It broke my heart. Luckily, the asshole called the ambulance once he saw me laying there lifeless and blue. Unfortunately, I didn't learn. Just Thursday, a couple friends of mine were hanging out. We took 5 bars, which is nothing for me. I really wanted something to help kick 'em in, so we got a pint of vodka, which was just drank between one friend and I. At that point, I was fucked up. I can't tell you where we ended up, or what the hell we did really. I know we ended up back to my apartment complex. In the storage unit, there's a little room with carpet and a stained couch in there. My friend Amy and Taylor were doing heroin. I was just sitting there, high on Xanax, drinking a second pint to myself. I noticed they both were just nodded out, and I was bored, so I left and went home. I was on my laptop, talking to this girl I really like, and eating. Unfortunately, my friend Amy called and told me she stole a bundle from Taylor, who was just passed out. My dumbass goes back, not thinking. Amy was pressed up against one of the storage bins, unable to keep her eyes open. I'll never forget. It was just like out of a movie. A shitty, abandoned storage unit and a couple of junkies. Anyway, I did one bag and was going to keep it at that. Amy said I did it wrong and to do another, but I felt the drip. I knew I ingested it perfectly fine, but I did the other bag anyway, followed by another and another. I laid the cushions from the couch on the ground so Amy and I could lay together, because the girl Taylor was sleeping on the couch. Last thing I remember is smoking my last cigarette. Amy said she woke up with my body against hers, and it felt cold. She looked at me, and my lips and fingernails were blue, and I wasn't breathing. I was comatose. She tried shaking me and screaming my name, but I wouldn't wake. She called my neighbor, who is a good friend. She rushed over and told me she looked at me and instantly said, "She's dead." She gave me CPR while on the phone with the paramedics. Finally, she calls my mother and brother. My brother rushes in and says, "She's fucking dead. Oh my fucking God." They ended up working on me in the storage unit and then took me off to the hospital, where I woke. I was still completely fucked up, with my mom and brother standing there. This time not broken-hearted like the first, but so disappointed. It disturbed me so bad the first time, so I can't believe it happened a second. Xanax really will make me do anything. I need to stop taking that shit. I should feel really fucking lucky to be alive right now. My third time may not be so lucky. My life just took a horrible turn for the worse. I am not at my lowest point, however, thanks to being out on bail and away from the hellishness of being confined to a jail cell. Where I fucked up. On a warm Saturday night 10 days ago, I was with the choice to eat the benzos Xanax and Valium. I do not have a benzo tolerance and rarely use them. I had finally came across some and decided to eat a few. At around 5 p.m. Saturday, I ate 2 milligrams of Alprazolam and 20 milligrams of diazepam, 2 blue pills each, figuring this would mellow me out after the hard week I had at work. I had no plans that night and the next day, so I made plans to get intoxicated. I had a small collection of acid and 5-MeO DMT, which I had not touched in months, but I did not specifically plan a trip. Around 6 p.m., I am definitely intoxicated, in a drunken-like way, but with less euphoria and some slight depression and confusion. I stumbled to my small substance collection and eat 2 more blue Xanax. I wanted to be a little bit more into oblivion because I was feeling slightly depressed, which was from the benzos in the first place, but I didn't realize it at the time. From 6 to 7 p.m., I spent my time stumbling around in my yard, almost feeling like a kid. I ran around and rolled in the grass. Then I got up and took off running into the house and back to my room. I pushed on the closed door thinking it was open to crack, and my face whacked right into it. I could definitely feel the pain despite my intoxication. I got into my room and got into my drugs. I pulled out a 5-strip of Futurama blotter acid somewhere around 7 p.m. and ate it. I got really excited, thinking I was going to blast off to some wonderful psychedelic reality that I have read about, but never had the balls to attempt. I then got out my aluminum foil pipe and threw an eyeballed amount of 5-MeO DMT in. It was what looked like 20 grains of salt. This would definitely not be something I would do sober. Same with acid. I inhaled the rough-tasting substance and held my breath. Soon, a whomp, whomp, whomp noise surrounded me, like nitrous, but much more menacing. A tense feeling spread through my body. I felt my heart get squeezed, then break, and I was bleeding all over myself internally. I was so scared, but knew there was nothing I could do, so I just tried to accept that I was going to die for sure. I saw a bright white light, and I couldn't see anything else. I do not remember what happened. The next thing I know, I am outside laying in my yard, twitching all over violently, but not quite seizure-like. I see the clouds morphing shapes and colors. I see all imaginable colors floating through the sky. The sun was setting, so I guess this was around 7:45. I also hear voices and strange music that could never be synthesized. It sounded very alien and started to frighten me. I got up off the ground and started to stop twitching. I thought I was coming down from the acid since I was confused. At this point, I don't think I remember smoking the 5-MeO DMT. I only think I am coming down from the acid already. Maybe it's because the 5-MeO DMT trip seemed to last many hours when it only lasted minutes, but I can't be completely sure. I go into the house, which took a lot of effort because I was very uncoordinated. Everything was liquid, and I became convinced this was actually the real world, and that my experience of sober reality before this trip had illusioned me into thinking solids existed. Everything seemed so real, clearer than ever before, despite the melting, fractals, and distortions. I remember trying to figure out how to open a beer can. I sat on my kitchen table pressing the tab in wrong directions, and I could not do it. I ended up cracking a hole in it with a juice can opener and sipping through it. I kept hearing the strange alien music getting louder, and I heard voices in specific directions that startled me. I do not remember the specifics of what the voices said, but suddenly it became apparent that I must get out of my house, or something horrible was going to happen to me. I remember running out of my front door in a panic. Most of what happens next is pieced together from my neighbor's account, who was an acquaintance, and the police reports. I do recall some flashes of the events, but most are clips that are a few nanoseconds in length that I can't accurately describe. I ran to my neighbor's house across the street and past a big yard. Houses are spread out a good bit around here. I went up to his mailbox and dug my hands inside. He must have saw me run up to his door because he came out right away and said, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" All I did was stare at him. He said I looked like a frightened, insane animal ready to pounce. He took a step back and balled up his fists. "You don't look so good. How about we take a walk back to your house?" I yelled, "He told me to come. He told me I would find my answer here." I then sat down and curled up in a ball. "Do you need me to call an ambulance?" Then I snapped. I don't know and can't guess what the fuck was going through my head at this point. I screamed in a non-human way, as it was later described, and tore into my neighbor. I beat and kicked at him with all I had. At first, he acted defensively and put his arms up to defend himself. Then he ran back into his house and came out with a can of mace. I ran away, sensing danger. It came to me again, apparently, that I must get into my neighbor's house. It was extremely important to my survival. By this time, it was night. My neighbor had gone back inside to call the cops. I walked around the back of his house to his sliding glass doors. I remember touching the glass and wondering what was stopping my finger, because I could see right through the door. I thought of it as a force field of some type that was a test. If I could pass the test of getting past this freak, I would find what I was looking for. I picked up a small metal table and whirled it into the glass force field with all the strength I had. It broke the glass and kept on going about 5 feet. I walked through the destroyed force field and felt like I had accomplished an important step of some kind of goal I was going after, which I unfortunately can't remember. I heard footsteps coming fast from the other side of the house. I sensed danger and leaped up the steps that were to my left. I went into a dark room and saw a glowing clock. Its red letters burned into my memory, and now I cannot look at digital clocks without getting intense anxiety and confusion. I picked up the clock and held it. Then my neighbor ran in, flicks on the light, and unleashes hell on me. I remember thinking something like I was being attacked by supernatural forces. I couldn't breathe or even see. My upper body was burning, and I literally thought I had caught on fire. I fought for my life and thrashed into everything with my fists. I stumbled around and fell down the steps I had walked up. I screamed so loud that my neighbors arrived before the cops did, keeping distance. When the cops arrived, my neighbor was on the ground holding his head. I was in the house breaking things and screaming. The cops rushed in with guns drawn. "Get down on the ground now!" I couldn't understand language. Everything was just sounds at this point. I didn't know what language was, so I was unable to follow the pig's instructions. Then I felt a stab and my body seize. It was the most painful thing I have ever felt, and I can't imagine anything worse. They had shot me with a taser, 2 darts stuck in me, blasting me to the ground in a silenced, choking agony. The paramedics came and treated me on the scene, now in my neighbor's yard, with saline for my eyes and bandages for my hands, which were badly beaten. They gave me an examination of blood pressure and heart rate. Then I said I was okay to be put in police custody. Apparently they repeatedly asked me what I had taken, and finally I had answered, shrooms. I'd rather not go into detail about the jail cell because it will induce unpleasant flashbacks. as writing this has already done. I will just say it was hell, to understate it. The cops were real assholes to me. When I got to the police station, they literally threw me in my jail cell and said, "You are fucked." I was charged with assault, public intoxication, disorderly conduct, vandalism, trespassing, and possession of a Schedule IV substance. I had 5 Xanax pills in my pocket. I was bailed out by a close family member who was severely disappointed and upset with me. The bail was set at $3,500. It was a terrible journey to hell. I will never trip again on anything. I have lost all desire for altered states. Plus, I now will face jail soon and a long probation. My lawyer says he will try to negotiate a 30-day sentence, but he can't promise it will be that small. My neighbor was cool about it. Well, not cool, but as cool as someone could be in his situation. I called him and apologized, and he told me what happened. He didn't lecture me at all about my drugs or my actions. At the end of our somewhat brief conversation, he said, "Good luck," and hung up. A seemingly inexhaustible supply of green gel tabs was available to me in the spring and summer of 1999. Me and my friend, whom we'll call Jesse, each dropped 2 hits of acid on an incredibly humid summer night. A lot of people who have done acid in any form and like to drink beer know that you can drink countless beers when you're tripping. Alcohol in general seems to have no effect on me if I'm tripping, although it does taste very good. That's where I got too cocky and made a huge mistake that I'm still learning lessons from to this day. Also, many people who have mixed alcohol with a tranquilizing drug, in my case, Xanax, know the extremely pleasurable feelings it can bring as long as it's not overdone. My brother had given me a bottle of Xanax because he had stopped taking it. The bottle contained 12.5 milligram pills, 6 for me and 6 for Jesse. We crushed them up and started snorting really huge lines when the acid began to peak. When the Xanax kicked in, I couldn't fully explain the sensations I was feeling. My tongue was numb, my eyes were watering, and I had almost a tunnel vision. It was weird. On top of that, I was tripping my balls off. Me and Jesse start wandering around the streets down by the tracks for a while when we decide to head up to 12th Street, where my friends were throwing a kegger. So we go to this party, tripping our balls off and feeling completely twisted from the pills, laughing like crazed lunatics. We got to the party and made our way to the keg in the back. We both start drinking like a couple of fishes. That's when trouble started. By about my 6th beer, I began to feel even stranger than before. The numb feeling in my tongue had taken over my entire body, and soon I dropped to my knees, unable to stand. But I was still tripping, so I was still laughing and having a good time. I figured that the acid I took would keep me awake, which it did, but I soon lost touch with reality when I started on my 9th beer. I don't remember anything after that. The next thing I knew, I was lying in the alley with rain pouring on me. It was dawn when I woke up. I had to have been out of it for at least 6 hours. I thought that I had just passed out, but when I went back upstairs, there was a savage scene. There were broken beer bottles everywhere, smashed keg cups, ashtrays dumped on the floor, and my best friend Jesse passed out on the kitchen floor with a bloody nose, covered with broken glass. I already knew the story before it was told to me. Apparently when I blacked out, I had gone ballistic and started destroying the place. Jesse had tried to stop me, and supposedly I had cracked him in the face with a beer bottle, knocking him out cold. About 20 minutes after that happened, I had left the party, but of course I didn't go far because I woke up in the back alley. I want you to know this. I am not a fighter. I have never been the violent type. If you look at me, I'm tall, skinny, and certainly not tough looking. The whacked out combination of drugs I took had sent me into a vortex I'd never visited before and never want to visit again. Since then, I'd never taken any more acid or downers. The moral of the story is, even if I'm on a drug that keeps me wide awake, such as acid in my case, or meth, mixing alcohol with downers can be lethal. I consider myself lucky. When I finally did go to sleep, I could have never woken up. I had taken an amount of chemicals in overdose proportions. Sadly, it took this kind of experience for me to be more responsible with drugs and alcohol. I wanted to get high one day when I was bored. I could not obtain any bud that day and I was pissed, so I took a couple of Z-bars. I wake up in my room on the floor. There is a belt tied around my ankles. I unbuckle it and I feel a sharp pain, almost like a bump in the back of my head. I stumble downstairs and almost everything is smashed. I go into my roommate's room and he has a small wooden stick in his hand. He tells me I was still high and needed to sit down. He told me I got mad because after taking 2 bars, I was not fucked up, so I took a lot of pills. He said he warned me not to, but I didn't listen and just sat down really fast on the couch. After like 15 minutes, he says I was starting to get really sluggish and started drooling. I ripped my shirt in half and walked out of the house. He says I started cursing at the neighbor's dog and saying "fuck you" really loudly, sounding really drunk. He says I even tried to swing at the dog, but missed and stumbled into the ground because I lost my balance. He says I ran back inside, falling like 10 times on the way to the door. I then started yelling, "It's all your fault, I'm not high," at my roommate. I threw a glass vase at him, but missed and hit a mirror, thus breaking it. I then started yelling at the top of my lungs and breaking everything I could find. He said he couldn't stop me due to me throwing shit at him whenever he came close to me. I ran upstairs and slipped, thus hitting my chin on the railing. He says I kept running up as if I felt no pain. I took a wooden stick out from the attic and threw it at his head while I was running towards him. He got hit this time, but he then took it and gave me a clean shot with it to the back of the head. He says the impact caused me to fall into a knocked out state. I was then placed on my room's floor with the door closed. Like 7 days after this, I was still walking in a stumble and felt like everything was fast. My speech slurred and my eyes were pinkish. I was not high then, but I was in a state I could not notice. I was clearly noticeably high to others though, due to people I know saying, "Dude, did you drink?" My roommate says I probably had a psychotic episode or something from Xanax, but I wasn't sure if this was a fact. I still don't know what caused this violent reaction, since the only thing wrong before I popped my pills was that I couldn't get pot. As I am prescribed anti-anxiety medication, I feel relatively confident of my knowledge of how these drugs affect me. That aside, I had nothing to do one particular evening, so I decided to take some pills and pass out. I had a long drive in the AM planned, but I didn't think it would affect my ability to drive 10 or so hours later. So I emptied a bottle of the pills on my desk, popped in a CD, and threw back 4 1mg pills. Xanax has little effect on me whatsoever, so this is relatively a low dose for me. Please take heed that this is how my body reacts. Some people take 1 milligram and are high, so don't take my experience as relation to yours. For example, I took a bar, 2 milligrams, tonight, and just played basketball without any problems. So you get my drift as to how it affects me. Anyway, that night, I decided to take another one, or 2, or 3. I don't remember anything after that. I woke up feeling normal. I'm assuming I had at least 6 hours of sleep. I packed my clothes and hopped in my car. I still remember this. I got on the freeway and began driving, yet the lines on the road were blurry and I was seeing double. I was so high, I didn't even know I was high, so I continued on thinking nothing of it. I remember thinking this was unusual, but was unaffected otherwise. Somewhere along the line, I ran into a curb. Where? I don't know. I was trying to fix my tire, which had been blown out from the impact, obviously with no success. I remember being completely emotionless about the whole ordeal. I simply called someone to fix it, and again, I was on my way. Minutes later, without my knowledge of this, multiple cop cars were behind me. Apparently, I had been swerving lane to lane and someone called the police. I drove for 20 more minutes, completely unaware of the police behind me. As I approached my exit, where I was meeting family members, I passed out and I hit a fire hydrant. When I got out of the car, there were cops everywhere. This is one of the few things I remember after blacking out. Lucky for me, the cops bought the story that I had an adverse reaction to a new medication and I was let go with no offense. I was in fact on an antidepressant, which I blamed the blackout on. At the time, I thought this was what had caused it, as I knew I hadn't taken any Xanax that morning. The police checked with a local pharmacy, and due to my cooperation, they were kind enough to let me go when my family arrived. Amazing, huh? When I came home, I looked at my pill bottle, realizing what had happened. I was still high from last night. Judging by the few pills left, I believe I had taken at least 10 milligrams. However, I believe it's closer to 15. Anyway, the moral of the story is, Xanax is a very helpful drug in reducing anxiety. However, it dilutes my thought process if taken at too high of a dose. Like I said, I hopped in that car having no idea that I was indeed intoxicated. I was in my own world. I have never driven drunk. I don't drink. I am an honor roll student in college, and I don't use any drugs aside from occasional marijuana use.